regarding depression into one's life, and be able to incorporate these biblical principles regarding healthy thought, whether you suffer from mental health challenges or not. Obviously, not all of us have a diagnosable, I hope not all of us has a diagnosable mental health challenge, but all of us struggle with our thoughts from time to time. So let's move to the next slide. So the topic of depression is or the history of it. The first time it was described was by the Greek physician Hippocrates as melancholia, which is symptoms of what he called fears and despondencies if they last a long time. One could be diagnosed with this. Throughout the centuries, the term depression was first used to refer to a psychiatric set of symptoms sometime in the 1800s by a number of different physicians. And we skip a bunch of history because we don't have time to talk about all of it. In the 1950s and 1960s, a bunch of psychiatrists got together and tried to categorize all of the psychiatric conditions that exist in the world. And we call this the DSM, or it's a book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So I think this is an important place to start when we're talking about depression, to differentiate it from the things that I treat when you come to see me as a surgeon. So for example, the point is that depression is a clinical diagnosis. It's not not something that we can diagnose with a lab test. To illustrate this, if you came to see me and you had abdominal pain, you had some right upper quadrant abdominal pain, kind of below your rib cage, there's some things that we could do to find out what's going on. I might order an ultrasound. We could look at your gallbladder, see if your gallbladder has gallstones. We could do some blood tests and find out if those gallstones are blocking a bile duct. There's a bunch of stuff we could do. And I would also take a history and ask you, when did this start? What makes it better? What makes it worse? Yada, yada. Unfortunately, it's a little bit different when it comes to psychiatric and conditions. There's no brain imaging test that we use to diagnose these things. We have theories about why people develop these, and there's a number of those theories, and some of them are like neurotransmitter theories and things like that. But at the end of the day, what we do is we ask about history, symptoms, and we make some diagnoses. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to look just briefly at this categorization of major depressive disorder. If you could go to the next slide. So this is, as I mentioned, the next slide, please. There we go. This is a clinical diagnosis. So this is not based on tests, it's based on what you tell your doctor. Basically, it doesn't really matter the major points. It's not important. But the point is that there's a list of symptoms. These symptoms have to last more than 2 weeks. It can't be just brief. The symptoms are like depressed mood, diminished interest or pleasure in activities, fatigue, loss of energy, insomnia, feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt, diminished ability to concentrate, recurrent thoughts of death, suicidal ideation, plans, attempts. Let's go to the next slide if we could. So, let's turn to the Bible. Let's turn to 1 Kings chapter 19. And this is a story that I think maybe there's some that better illustrate, but this is the best one that I could think of that really illustrates a lot of the principles that I think God has for us when it comes to psychiatric conditions and depression. And this is the story of Elijah, and we're going to pick it up in 1 Kings chapter 19. But I want to kind of set the scene for you. So God's people, the Israelites, had turned away from God, and they had forsaken him a few years before this story takes place. And as they were wont to do, they were continually turning away from God, and God was continually calling them back. Well, God raised up Elijah, and he came and he went to the king, and he said, it's not going to rain until, it's not going to rain for the next few years. And there was a major drought. And to make a long story short, at the end of this time period, God made himself known, and the people chose to worship God. Just after that, Jezebel is trying to kill him, and this is where we pick the story up. It's just after a major victory for God's people, where the people choose God, the rain comes, Elijah runs in front of Ahab's chariot. It's this major story of victory for God and the cause of God, and for Elijah specifically. And now we pick it up in chapter 19 and verse 1. Elijah goes from one of his greatest highs to one, I would argue, of his lowest lows in a remarkably short period of time. So 1 Kings 19, starting in verse 1. And Ahab told Jezebel, his wife, all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets of Baal, with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. So Jezebel is threatening God's servant here. And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life. And he went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die, and said, it is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my father's. So Elijah had just received this major high point, and now he receives news that he is a wanted man, and he runs and he asks God that he would die. And he said, I am no better than my fathers. He clearly, although it doesn't say it in so many words, Elijah appears to be suicidal. He appears to have feelings of worthlessness and excessive or inappropriate guilt. He's fatigued. He has loss of energy. Although clinically these symptoms didn't exist, or this syndrome wasn't a thing at the time, I think a psychiatrist might have diagnosed him with depression. So what happens next? What does God do? So this is God's servant, probably the foremost warrior for God at this time in Israel's history, and he has run away, and he is suffering from depression. So Elijah lays and he takes a nap. In verse 5 it says, then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. Then he looked, and by his head was a cake, baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. So this is a kind of a side point, not the main point, but God first provides for Elijah's felt needs. God provides food and water, which is always a good place to start. And then God confronts Elijah. So let's read. You read in verse 7. And the angel of the Lord came back the second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. And then in verse 9 it says, and he went into a cave and spent the night in the cave, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? So God is about to do some intensive therapy for Elijah and really confront him about what's going on. If you go to the next slide. So Elijah has these depressive feelings, and there's this concept that I think is key to this story and key to understanding the story and key to understanding thoughts and feelings in general. In Psalm 23, verse 7, it says, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. So there's this concept that's been kind of described over the years of a cognitive triangle. So obviously in this particular situation, Elijah was experiencing negative emotions. Those negative emotions were manifesting themselves in negative thoughts, and vice versa. His negative thoughts about how bad things were and how bad he was impacting his negative emotions. And then those thoughts and those emotions were impacting his behavior, and vice versa. When he starts running, he starts feeling worse. And then he starts feeling worse, and so he has these negative thoughts, and it's this cycle that spirals. If you could go to the next slide. Ellen White says in the fourth volume of the manuscripts, no one but yourself can control your thoughts. In the struggle to reach the highest standard, success or failure will depend much upon the character and the manner in which the thoughts are disciplined. If the thoughts are well girded, as God directs, they shall be each day. They will be upon those subjects that will help us to greater devotion. If the thoughts are right, then as the result, the words will be right. The actions will be of that character to bring gladness and comfort and rest to souls. Every right action in the fear of God brings us nearer to him. Let's go to the next slide. And let's take a look at verses 9 through 14. So keep this idea in mind about the emotions and thoughts and behaviors all feeding on each other. Let's read verses 9 through 14. So he went into the cave, like we said, and he spent the night in that place. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So he answers, and he says the thoughts that I'm sure he had been dwelling upon for these 40 days as he's been going to the mountain of God. So he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life." Then he said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. And that's often the way it is when God talks to us. It's not with the big things, it's with the little things. So it was when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And so then he repeats himself. He says, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life." Can you go to the next slide? Next slide. So, this is what Elijah is thinking. The people have forsaken your covenant. They've thrown down your altars. They've killed your prophets. I alone am left, and they seek to kill me. So these thoughts led to some pretty not great feelings, some feelings of depression. I'm sure he had some anxiety thrown in there as well. A lot of negative feelings were a result of this, and these feelings and these thoughts led him to take what he thought was the logical action, and that action was running away. So let's go to the next slide here. So this brings us to the next topic, the next concept that I wanted to introduce, of cognitive distortions. A cognitive distortion is a thought that causes a person to perceive reality inaccurately due to being exaggerated or irrational. So cognitive distortions, these almost like cataracts of the mind, are common in those with depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges. Now, of course, they're not just common in those people. Cognitive distortions are often commonly encountered in our everyday life as well. You know, we'll get to some examples, but it's very easy to focus on the negative, to see the negative things, to exclude the positive things, to discount positive things, just focus on the negative. It's a very easy trap to fall into, even if you don't fit into the categories that the psychiatrists have come up with for being majorly depressed. So let's take another look, if you go to the next slide, at 1 Kings 19 in verse 14. So he said here, "I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenants, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I only am left, and they seek to take my life, to take it away." Go to the next slide here. So there's a number of of these cognitive distortions that have been identified, and a lot of the things that Elijah says can fit into multiple of these categories. Overgeneralization. Was it really true that everyone had turned away from God? Well, we'll get to that, but no. All or nothing thinking. Mental filter. So mental filter is when you filter out the positive and all you can see is the negative, which is very similar to disqualifying the positive. So you see that there's some positive stuff, but that doesn't really matter. All that matters is all you can focus on is these negative things in your life. Jumping to conclusions, magnification, catastrophizing, or minimization. So magnification of the bad things, I am left, or minimization of the good in the world. So let's read God's response. This is God's, I guess you could call it therapy, or confrontation, showing Elijah what was really the truth. If we can go, let's read in verses 15 through 18. Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, anoint Hazael as king over Syria." So God's giving him some positive actions to take here. And you shall anoint Jehu the son of Nimshi as king over Israel. And Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel Mahoya you shall anoint as prophet in your place. It shall be that whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill, and whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elisha will kill. And this is the key point I want to bring out. Yet I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So God is saying, in a way, what you have said is, I'm sure it felt that way to Elijah, and maybe to all human appearances it was that way. But you have to remember that the people had just chosen God just a few days, at this point it had been more than 40, but just not that long before, the people had chosen God. And there was 7,000 in Israel who hadn't bowed the knee to Baal. And on some level, I would think that Elijah would have known this. So these are the cognitive distortions that were clouding the mind of Elijah when it came to this depression. He was catastrophizing. They seek to kill me also. Overgeneralization. The people have forsaken your covenant. And mental filtering. Filtering out the positive, like I said, to focus only on the negative. I alone am left. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, whoops. We're a slide behind. One more slide. Elijah had thought that he alone in Israel was a worshiper of the true God, but he who reads the hearts of all revealed to the prophet that there are many others who, through the long years of apostasy, had remained true to him. I have left me, God said, 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which hath not kissed him. Some prophets and kings. Next slide, please. If, under trying circumstances, men of spiritual power, pressed beyond measure, become discouraged and desponding, if at times they see nothing desirable in life, that they should choose it, this is nothing strange or new. Let all such remember that one of the mightiest prophets fled for his life before the rage of an infuriated woman. A fugitive, weary and travel-worn, bitter disappointment crushed his spirits. He asked that he might die. But it was when hope was gone and his life work seemed threatened with defeat that he learned one of the most precious lessons of his life. In the hour of his greatest weakness, he learned the need and the possibility of trusting God under circumstances the most forbidding. So let's go to the next slide. So what is the solution for these cognitive distortions? How do we clear out these mental distortions, the cataracts on our view of the world? It's not easy to do, especially when you've been in this cycle of depression. So the solution to this, if you ask the psychiatrists, is something different than what I'm going to tell you the solution is. The solution, the ultimate solution, is to see things the way God sees. There's a lot of helpful strategies and homework assignments and these sorts of things that a therapist will give you, and those can all be helpful. But at the end of the day, the important thing is asking God to help see things the way he sees them. And I want to share a second story with you, which happens just a little while later. And if you could go to the next slide, please. We're going to turn to 2 Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6, and starting in verse 8. This is the clearest example I can see of God clearing out some cataracts, spiritual cataracts, that is, from someone. So in 2 Kings chapter 6, and we'll start in verse 8. Now the king of Syria was making war. So this is after Elijah had left the scene and was actually taken to heaven, and Elisha is now the prophet in the land. So now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he was consulting with his servants, saying, "My camp will be in such and such a place." And the man of God, Elisha, sent to the king of Israel, saying, "Beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are coming down here." So there was an intelligence. Israel's intelligence service was giving the king information on where the Syrians were going to be. In verse 10, then the king of Israel sent someone to the place which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him, and he was watchful there, not just once or twice. So this happened again and again and again. The Syrians would try to attack, but God would send a message through Elisha to the king of Israel and thwart the plans. So this obviously made the king of Syria unhappy. Therefore the heart of the king of Syria was greatly troubled by this thing, and he called his servants and said to them, "Will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? Who is the spy, in other words?" And one of his servants said, "None, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom." So he said, "Go and see where he is, that I may send and get him." And it was told him, saying, "Surely he is in Dothan." Therefore he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. So the king of Syria goes and surrounds where God's prophet is. And when the servant of the man of God, so Elisha's servant, arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, "Alas, my master, what shall we do?" So Elisha here in this story is in a bind. He's surrounded by thousands of warriors who want him taken captive and ultimately dead. His servant was terrified. All he could see was the enemy. How often do we experience situations like this where all we can see is the enemy? Let's go to the next slide. Let's keep reading in verses 16 through 22. So he answered, "Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." It's interesting in the Bible, we see again and again and again, incidentally, every time that an angel appears, it seems like almost every time God or the angel starts off saying, "Do not be afraid." And specifically in this instance, he says, "Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Verse 17, and Elisha prayed and said, "Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see." Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So when the Syrians came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Strike these people, I pray, with blindness." And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Now Elisha said to them, "This is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek." But he led them to Samaria. So it's kind of interesting here. God opens the eyes of Elisha's servants, and he closes the eyes of the enemies of God. And then Elisha was able to just lead them straight into the city of Samaria. And so it was when they had come to Samaria that Elisha said, "Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see." And the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and they were inside Samaria. Now, the king of Israel, of course, was greatly pleased by this all. In verse 21, it says, "Now when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, 'My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?'" This is a great victory as far as the king of Israel saw. But he answered, "You shall not kill them. Would you kill those whom you have taken captive with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master." Then he prepared a great feast for them, and after they ate and drank, he sent them away, and they went to their master. So the bands of Syrian raiders came no more to the land of Israel. So God had a very non-violent way to deal with these invaders. But the point I want to get at, it's actually a really amazing story. But the point here is that incorrect or incomplete thoughts, these mental cataracts, led Elisha's servants to incorrect feelings, and if not corrected, would have led to incorrect actions. Let's go to the next slide. "Fear not," was the answer of the prophet, "for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And then, that the servant might know this for himself, Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. The Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire around about Elisha. Between the servant of God and the hosts of the armed foremen was an encircling band of heavenly angels. They had come down in mighty power, not to destroy, not to exact homage, but to encamp round about and minister to the Lord's weak and helpless ones. So, in closing, I think it's really important to keep a number of things in mind. I think, well, first of all, the big takeaways from this is our actions and our thoughts and our emotions all feed on each other. So I think that's a really important point. I think it's important to keep in mind the idea of the cognitive distortions in our lives. We have to keep in mind when we have a thought, I think it's important to take it to God and say, is this a thought that is true? Is this a thought that is one that you would have me to have? In closing, let's turn to Philippians 4 and read verses 4 through 8. Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 8. If I can turn there myself. Philippians 4, verses 4 through 8. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue, if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate, dwell on these things. So I think as we go, as we see things in our lives, as we have thoughts, feelings, actions, I challenge each of us to take them to God, find out, ask Him, is this a cognitive distortion or is this a thought from you? And I would challenge each of us to really think throughout this week about our thoughts, our feelings, our actions. Don't just let them roll through your mind, but really stop and analyze and ask God for help, for the renewing of the mind, and for the change that only He can bring. Let's turn to one more slide. When depression settles upon the soul, it is no evidence that God has changed. He is the same yesterday and today and forever. You are sure of the favor of God when you are sensible of the beams of the Sun of Righteousness. But if the clouds sweep over your soul, you must not feel that you are forsaken. Your faith, your seeing as God sees, must pierce the gloom. Your eye must be single and your whole body will be full of light. The riches of the grace of Christ must be kept before the mind. Treasure up the lessons that His love provides. Let your faith be like Job's, that you may declare, though He slay me, yet will I trust Him. Shall we close with prayer? Dear Father, thank you for the stories in the Bible. There's so many stories that we could talk about. David and Elijah and Elisha and Job. So many people in the Bible have struggled with so many things. And some of them, Father, are things that we would classify as mental health challenges. And Father, I pray that you would help each of us, whether we struggle with these sorts of things in a minor way or a major way. I pray that you would help us to bring them to you. Father, help us to see the world and our challenges and our situations the way that you see them. And Father, help us to see ourselves as you see us as well. Lord, as we go throughout this week, I pray that you would help us to bring every thought into captivity and help us to bring our thoughts to you, our feelings, and our actions. Go with us now, and may we have a blessed rest of our Sabbath. Thank you. Amen.